Archaeologists were looking for the long-lost tomb of Cleopatra when they found something that seemed too good to be real. Roughly 43 feet underground beneath a ruined Egyptian temple, there was a perfectly straight tunnel, carved through solid sandstone. The tunnel is over 4,200 feet long, and so precise that experts called it a geometric miracle. The tunnel sits beneath an ancient city west of Alexandria, near Egypt's Mediterranean coast. The team that found it carefully peeled back layers of stone and debris until they hit this passage, about 6.5 feet tall, cut cleanly into bedrock. There were no collapse marks or wandering curves, just precision. If you've ever tried to drill a straight hole into a wall at home and failed within seconds, imagine doing this underground for nearly a mile. Ancient builders had no GPS, no lasers, no modern surveying tools. Yet, this tunnel stays remarkably level over its entire length. That means they understood gradients, angles, and distance in a way that goes far beyond stack stones and hope. Engineers today rely on machines to maintain that kind of accuracy underground. These people relied on knowledge, repetition, and patience. Parts of the tunnel now sit underwater or collapsed, probably after several earthquakes that struck the region centuries ago. Some experts think the tunnel may have once connected the temple to water sources or ritual areas closer to the sea. Archaeologists noticed that the Egyptian tunnel is an exact replica of the Eupalinos tunnel in Greece. It's believed to be one of the most important engineering achievements of antiquity, which only makes the Egyptian tunnel more special. Underground passages in ancient Greece linked temples to sacred springs. Back in ancient times, people moved through space in specific ways, underground and above, to reenact myths and journeys of gods. A tunnel like this could represent a path to the underworld, rebirth, or divine transition. Nobody would invest this much effort in construction just for decoration. Plus, in earlier digs at the site, archaeologists pulled up all kinds of artifacts, including coins with the names and faces of Cleopatra VII and Alexander the Great. They also found figurines, statues of deities, a mummy with a gold tongue, and even an entire cemetery packed with Greco-Roman style mummies. The perfect geometric tunnel isn't an isolated flex. Not far away, underwater archaeologists off the coast of Alexandria uncovered something that sounds like it belongs in a royal travel documentary. A 2,000-year-old pleasure boat that once glided along the Nile. And this wasn't just another fishing vessel or cargo barge. It likely stretched over 115 feet long and 23 feet wide, and had a decorated cabin, plus around 20 rowers, which turned the river into a moving palace. This isn't speculation pulled out of thin air. An ancient Greek geographer named Strabo wrote about these exact boats around the 1st century BCE. He described lavish vessels used by royalty during festivals and ceremonial outings in Alexandria. For years, historians treated that as a poetic exaggeration. Then, this wreck surfaced, and suddenly, Strabo sounded less like a storyteller and more like a witness. Even ancient art backs it up. The Palestrina mosaic from Italy shows richly decorated boats floating down the Nile. They match both the texts and the physical evidence almost perfectly. Inside the wreck, archaeologists found something small but incredibly human. Graffiti scratched into the wood in Greek. Just writing left behind by someone who stood on that deck 2,000 years ago. Researchers haven't fully decoded the text yet, but its existence alone matters. It tells us this wasn't just a floating symbol of power. People lived on it. It was sort of like a modern luxurious yacht, and the Nile was like a highway. All types of vessels with passengers were moving back and forth, visiting friends, carrying their goods for trade, doing business, and, of course, going on pleasure cruises. The location of the pleasure boat makes the story even better. The boat sat near the temple of Isis on Antirodos, an island that once hosted royal and religious buildings before earthquakes and rising seas erased it from the surface. That temple collapsed around 50 CE, and researchers believe the boat may have sunk during the same disaster. Another recent find that has to do with life on the Nile is the lower part of the massive worship complex about 10 miles southwest of Cairo. It connects directly to an upper temple dedicated to Ra, the Egyptian deity of the sun. The newly excavated part is a 4,500-year-old valley temple. The upper temple sits on higher ground, and archaeologists excavated it years ago. The valley temple is closer to the Nile, and it's connected to the upper part by a causeway. A German Egyptologist actually started excavating part of the temple back in 1901, but the groundwater sat much higher then, and he had to stop. Now, the groundwater level is lower, and a modern team has managed to excavate about half of the Valley Temple since 2024. Once they got in, archaeologists uncovered the remains of a columned entrance portico. Then they found blocks carved with a calendar of religious events, almost like an ancient public schedule. The text includes feasts for Sokar, a falcon-headed deity linked to Memphis, which was a major capital during the Old Kingdom, plus the Festival of Min, a fertility deity, and even the Procession of Ra. The calendar blocks all showed up around the entrance portico area, which most definitely means that the outside facade of the temple displayed this long feast calendar publicly. That's why archaeologists think this might be one of the earliest examples of a true public calendar ever found. A literal event list for an entire community, built into the architecture. On top of that, the team found dozens of decorated blocks covered in inscriptions that named a pharaoh who ruled around 2420 to 2389 BCE and had the temple built. This temple shows how people moved through ancient Egypt. Because the upper temple handled the main worship, but the valley temple made the whole place accessible. It acted like the landing area for boats coming in, either directly from the Nile or more likely from one of its side channels. So instead of hiking across desert terrain, visitors could arrive by water, step onto the temple's landing stage, enter through the Valley Temple, then head up the causeway ramp toward the upper temple on the hill. After about a century of use, researchers found that the Valley Temple had been repurposed into a residential area. And the best part is, what they found from that era: 2 wooden pieces used for playing Senet, an ancient board game. Senet shows up at other Egyptian sites too, including King Tutankhamun's tomb, but nobody fully agrees on the rules today. Some discoveries in Egypt create new mysteries instead of solving the old ones. Earlier in 2025, archaeologists announced the discovery of the first pharaoh's burial found in or near the Valley of Kings since King Tut's tomb in 1922. The newly found tomb of Thutmose II flooded almost immediately after burial. Ancient officials rushed in, removed the mummy and most of the grave goods, and hid them somewhere else. The weirdest part is that an alabaster ointment jar inside the tomb links the burial directly to Hatshepsut, Thutmose II's wife and half-sister. The inscription basically says she made this monument for him, which proves she arranged his burial. But it still doesn't explain why she placed him here and later chose the Valley of the Kings for herself. Now, archaeologists are studying a huge mound of rubble near the tomb, about 75 feet tall, and suspect it was built to hide something important. If a second tomb sits underneath, it could be complete and undisturbed. So, the deeper the archaeologists dig, the more ancient Egypt stops feeling like a gone civilization and starts feeling like a paused one. Looks like it didn't just survive time, it outsmarted it, and we're only just beginning to catch up. It started as a routine cleaning to scoop some mud off the coast of Indonesia, but turned into a discovery of remnants of a lost, submerged, Ice Age landmass. Archaeologists found more than 6,000 fossil fragments, and among them, 140,000-year-old Homo erectus remains. This find made scientists rethink how early humans lived, moved, and interacted in Southeast Asia. For years, they thought that Homo erectus on Java Island lived in isolation, separated from the rest of the world. But these dredged fossils blew that story apart. It turns out Java wasn't an island at all back then, but part of a landmass called Sundaland. So, Southeast Asia stretched out like someone had drained the ocean, connecting Indonesia, Malaysia, Borneo, Thailand, and Vietnam into one gigantic landscape. Today's islands of Java, Sumatra, Borneo, and Bali were connected by river systems that probably looked like the Amazon, by forests where giant animals roamed, and by coastal plains that would later sink beneath the ocean when temperatures went up. And Homo erectus were not stuck. They were thriving in what honestly sounds like prehistoric bliss. Yep, it was nothing like we normally imagine Ice Age, a sort of frozen wasteland. Sea levels dropped more than 400 feet because so much water froze into glaciers. When all that water got locked up in ice, whole sections of the ocean floor popped out of the water like stepping stones. Suddenly, early humans didn't need boats. They could literally walk from what's now mainland Southeast Asia all the way to places that are islands today. They could do it while exploring and chasing herds across open land. It was sort of like a giant prehistoric highway system. That giant highway matters because it completely rewrites how early humans moved around. Instead of being trapped, Homo erectus had a whole continent to roam. They followed rivers, crossed valleys, and adapted to different environments the same way you learn shortcuts to the office or find new routes to your favorite coffee shop. And because everything was connected, animals wandered freely too. Tigers, elephants, supersized cows, and turtles the size of small cars. People followed these big animals. This among the fossils pulled from the Madura Strait, such as cut-marked turtle shells and cracked open bovid bones. When you see precise cut marks on bone, it means someone was deliberately carving meat off the bone with tools they made themselves. And cracked bones mean they were taking out marrow, which was like prehistoric energy gel, rich, fatty, and perfect when you need calories to survive. That's a level of planning and skill scientists didn't expect from Homo erectus. It pushes Homo erectus closer to species like early Homo sapiens and Denisovans when it comes to behavior. It means they weren't just surviving on scraps, they were actively pursuing animals, processing, and maybe even sharing food the same way later humans did. So if you imagine them as slow, hunched cavemen, forget that. These people were sharp. The techniques they used to process food look eerily similar to those used by other hominins. Not just Homo erectus, we're talking Homo floresiensis, Denisovans, and early Homo sapiens. That opens the door to the possibility that these groups didn't just exist side by side. They might have interacted. Maybe they traded ideas and copied techniques. Or maybe they even interbred or shared territories. All this makes Southeast Asia look not like a series of isolated islands, but like a buzzing human ecosystem, a place where different human species crossed paths. And here's the heartbreaking part. Everything we know about this place, everything humans built, lost, and discovered there, is all underwater now. When the Ice Age ended, glaciers melted like forgotten ice cream cones on a hot sidewalk. Sea levels rose. Slowly, then quickly, rivers flooded, coastlines vanished, entire human landscapes disappeared beneath the waves. Sundaland drowned over thousands of years, and the people who lived there either adapted or moved to higher ground. Archaeologists now try to interpret what these people did, how they lived, and how many human species walked that land. Every time they pull together bone or artifact from the seabed, we get one step closer to rewriting everything we thought we knew about early human migration. And the new discovery could mean that Southeast Asia may have been just as important to human evolution as Africa, the Middle East, or Europe. Looks like Sundaland wasn't a side quest, but a real mixing zone, a place where humanity experimented, adapted, learned, and evolved. Unexpected finds like this one in Indonesia keep popping up around the world and surprising scientists. Farmers in China were hoping to scoop up bat droppings for natural fertilizers inside a narrow limestone cave. But instead, they spotted pieces of fossilized bone that looked suspiciously like parts of a human skull. This skull turned out to be ridiculously old, around 300,000 years old. Scientists eventually named the fossil Maba 1. The discovery happened way back in 1958, but ever since then, nobody could agree on which ancient human species this skull belonged to. During the late Middle Pleistocene, the world was basically a crowded highway of different ancient human species wandering around. Or just maybe, Maba 1 came from a species we've never met before. The big issue was that researchers only found part of the skull, no jaw, no other bones. So it was like trying to solve a giant puzzle with half the pieces missing. For ages, scientists guessed it might be Neanderthal. But now they've used micro-CT scanning, which is like an X-ray superpower that lets you peek inside fossils without breaking them. That's when they noticed weird tube-like structures connecting parts of the brain case, something Neanderthals basically never had. The inside shape of the skull looked way more like Homo erectus, a much older human species. But even that wasn't a perfect match. The skull's size and shape were closer to modern humans and Neanderthals, and it showed traits Homo erectus usually didn't have. For example, it had a shorter forehead area and a thickened bregma, the meeting point between two skull bones. Maba 1 also had a strange dent on the forehead, almost like a bruise frozen in time. Whatever caused it, maybe a fall, maybe anemia, it happened while the person was alive. But there was no sign of infection, so that individual probably healed and kept living after whatever hit them. So Maba 1 doesn't match any known species perfectly, but it shares features with several and has a similar mystery fossil vibe as others found across Africa. In 1976, a famous paleontologist and her team found another human-like skull in Tanzania. That skull had features that looked surprisingly similar to Homo sapiens, even though it was unbelievably old. Scientists think it may be one of the earliest examples of our species ever discovered. That means this skull could help solve one of science's biggest questions. When exactly did Homo sapiens first show up? The sediment layer where that skull was found goes all the way back to the Middle Pleistocene. That's way earlier than what old textbooks used to claim about when modern humans appeared. And then there's a skull that turned up in Zambia's Broken Hill ore mine. Miners literally stumbled on it, plus a few other bones, completely by accident. Scientists started calling it Rhodesian Man, and at first, everyone thought it might be the big missing link between Homo erectus and Homo sapiens. But with newer research tools and better dating methods, they discovered it's around 299,000 years old and probably belonged to someone from the species Homo heidelbergensis. Every new fossil acts like a missing puzzle piece on the giant chaotic story of human evolution. Each one helps scientists connect species that once seemed unrelated, redraw family trees, and rewrite chapters of our past we didn't even know were wrong. Archaeologists just found the remains of a lost city from thousands of years ago, hiding in southeastern Europe. They were sure that it was nothing more than an old defense outpost, but new digs are changing that big time. They now believe the site might actually be the lost capital of an ancient kingdom of Lynkestis that has to do with Alexander the Great, the man who changed history. The ruins are near a small village called Cernobuki in North Macedonia. You can find mentions of them from 1966, but nobody really dug into them until about 15 years ago. At first, they found just a few ruins and thought it was a guard post used to spot Romans coming from the west. But now, a team of scientists went back with high-tech equipment and found proof this place wasn't just a tiny outpost. Researchers managed to look under the ground and found that the Acropolis the ruins sit on, which is a flat hilltop, has enough rooms and infrastructure to host a full-on city inside the fortress walls. It covers about 2.8 hectares and around 10,000 people lived here at its peak. Researchers also found a textile workshop and plenty of artifacts, including a coin from the time of Alexander the Great and with his image, axes, game pieces, and an oil lamp, and even a small ceramic with a heart motif. One of the coolest finds is a reusable clay theater ticket, which was unique to North Macedonia. This means there was also most likely a theater here, and it could be in one of the large buildings. Experts used to think that the city was from the time of King Philip V, but now, thanks to the coin and especially the ancient tools and broken pottery that were found, they believe people might have lived there during the Bronze Age. Lynkestis and the rest of Upper Macedonia had some pretty intense weather with freezing, rainy winters, and super hot summers. life there wasn't easy, and most of the time, it was all about surviving. The people who lived in the area were mostly nomadic herders, and they had to move around depending on the season. They traveled with their flocks of cattle, goats, and sheep, always looking for the best pasture lands. Back then, Macedonia was kind of like the outsider of the Greek world. It was part Greek, but powerful city-states like Athens and Sparta didn't really accept it. Thanks to this position on the edge, Macedonia had the chance to mix Greek traditions with local culture. Eventually, they took over and changed the whole ancient world under kings like Philip II and Alexander the Great. The new discoveries at Cernobuki show us how connected and powerful ancient Macedonia really was, especially since the city sat along trade routes to Constantinople. Big historical figures like Octavian and Agrippa might have passed through the area on their way to clash with Cleopatra and Mark Antony. The place could also be the lost capital of the ancient kingdom of Lynkestis or Lyncus. Some experts think that a major city in Upper Macedonia could be where Queen Eurydice was born. That powerful lady gave birth to Philip II of Macedon, who took over Lynkestis in the 4th century BCE. The kingdom of Macedon became independent, and thanks to it, the son of Philip II, Alexander the Great, later became the king of the Macedonian Empire. That man totally lived up to his name. In just 13 years, he created one of the biggest empires in history, stretching from Greece all the way to Egypt and India. And he managed to do all that before passing away at just 32 years old. Researchers plan to dig deeper into this important site to learn more about the early civilizations of Europe. This incredible discovery was possible thanks to Lidar. This remote sensing tool helps map things like how tall plants are, how thick forests are, and other details across big areas. Lidar is an active system, meaning it creates its own energy, in this case light, to scan the ground. A laser fires super-fast pulses of light that shoot down to the ground and bounce off things like buildings and tree branches. The LiDAR sensor then catches the reflected light and records it. The system measures how long it takes for the light to go from the laser to the ground and back. This is called the two-way travel time. That time helps figure out the distance the light traveled. Then, using that distance, the system can figure out the exact elevation of different spots. Scientists recently found another lost city using the same technology. This one, called Genola, was hiding beneath the dense jungles of Mexico for 600 years. All this time, researchers believed there was just an abandoned fortress there. There was no way to go and see until recently, when they used LiDAR and got a 3D model of the area in just 2 hours from a plane. Genola was built in pre-Columbian times between the years 1350 and 1521. It covered 360 hectares and had over 1,100 buildings, 2.5 miles of defensive walls, and a whole network of internal roads. The city had a well-planned urban layout with temples and ball courts and separate neighborhoods for the elites and commoners. It was a crucially important place for the Zapotech people, a group that had lived in the area since around 600 BCE. In Genola, families lived together in homes with big patios in the middle, surrounded by rooms. As families grew bigger, they would add more rooms and expand their homes. Since Genola was surrounded by mountains, the locals tried to use every piece of land on the slopes that was good enough to build a house. They even used natural drainage of the area to have water, and they must have been great at construction, as many of their constructions are still standing today. But at some point in the beginning of the 16th century, they didn't have enough fresh water and good farmland to grow food, and moved away to nearby Tehuantepec. Archaeologists plan to learn more about how the Zapotecs were organized, how they ruled their cities, and how they interacted with the Spanish when they arrived. They plan to study all 1,170 buildings found in the LiDAR scan, and it'll take a few years. Another recent find, made with the same groundbreaking tech, is a massive city that lay hidden beneath the thick green canopy of the Amazon rainforest. A whole network of houses, plazas, roads, and canals was hiding in the shadow of a mighty volcano. Many scientists thought that ancient Amazonian people lived in tiny huts and cleared patches of land to survive. But this city, built 2,500 years ago and inhabited for nearly 1,000 years, debunked that theory and changed everything. Now, researchers think tens of thousands or even hundreds of thousands of people lived in complex urban societies. They scanned the area and found that 6,000 rectangular platforms, each about 66 by 33 feet and 6 to 9 feet high. These structures were arranged in clusters around central plazas that had straight roads with perfect right angles and paths connecting them. One of the roads was an impressive 16 miles long. Building straight roads like this is way harder than just going with the landscape. Some of these roads may have had great spiritual or ceremonial significance. The civilization was thriving thanks to rich soil from a nearby volcano. But the same volcano may have also led to its downfall. Researchers also found signs of threats to the cities, such as ditches that blocked entrances to the settlements. Maybe some people living nearby were trying to get in. The next step for the scientists will be to study the adjoining 116 square miles to know more about this large, complex society that could be bigger than the well-known Mayan cities in Mexico and Central America. Tiny microbes, basically ancient germs, have been frozen in Arctic ice for tens of thousands of years, just chilling there, since woolly mammoths were still walking around. And now, scientists think these little guys might wake up again if Arctic summers keep getting longer and warmer. Yep, you heard right. Zombie microbes. Great. These microbes have been stuck in permafrost, which is soil and ice that stays frozen solid year-round. The top layer melts a bit in the summer, but the really old stuff, those Ice Age microbes, are buried way deeper. They only thaw if things get really warm for months, not just a hot day or two. To study these microbes, the team went down to the permafrost research tunnel near Fairbanks in Alaska, a long underground hallway 50 feet below the surface, carved right into the ancient frozen ground. The tunnel stretches over 350 feet and lets scientists literally walk through thousands of years of frozen history. By the way, while checking out the walls, the researchers also spotted bones of mammoths and bison sticking out of the ice. One of the reasons why the researchers went to Alaska was to see how fast these ancient microbes could come back to life. Well, they were in for a surprise. These microbes don't need years, centuries, or magic spells to wake up. Just a couple of months of warm weather. Once they're awake, they start doing their microbe stuff, which includes pumping out greenhouse gases like CO2 and methane. And that's bad news, because those gases warm the planet even more. This melts more permafrost, which wakes up more microbes, which releases more gas. You get it. Basically, it's a nasty climate loop. Anyway, when scientists went down into the frozen tunnel to grab chunks of super old permafrost, the first thing they noticed was the awful smell. It wasn't just the stench of an old basement. It was something has been frozen for thousands of years and is finally waking up bad. Weirdly, microbiologists were happy. Such a smell is actually a good sign for them because it usually means tiny creatures, microbes, are still around. Back in the lab, the team soaked the frozen samples in the water that had a special kind of heavy hydrogen inside it. This helped them track what the microbes were doing later. Then they put the samples into fridges at 3 different temperatures: cold, kinda cold, and not too cold, to copy what future Arctic summers might feel like if the warming continues. For the first month, almost nothing happened. Even the warmer samples barely changed. Only a tiny number of microbes started waking up. Basically, a microscopic trickle of activity. But a few months later, things got more exciting. Thanks to the heavy water, scientists could watch how much of it the microbes used to build their cell membranes. It helped them figure out that the old microbes were making special fatty molecules that might help them stay alive in freezing conditions. By the 6-month mark, the samples that were stored at the warmer temperatures had transformed completely. They became more active and started forming little slime layers. The scientists could actually see these layers even without a microscope. The whole community of microbes wasn't super diverse, but those that were active behaved just like modern microbes that live in unfrozen soil today. In short, those ancient microbes were definitely alive and got pretty energetic once the temperatures were warm enough. This matters a lot for the Arctic and for the whole planet because these microbes survive by eating old organic material trapped in the permafrost. When they eat, they release greenhouse gases like carbon dioxide and methane, and the Arctic is warming faster than any other part of Earth. It means that the deep frozen layers might stay warm long enough for huge numbers of ancient microbes to wake up and start pumping out gas. Right now, northern permafrost holds about twice as much carbon as the entire atmosphere. If a lot of that carbon gets released, it could speed up the warming of our planet. It can lead to dramatic consequences, setting off a whole chain of huge changes and affecting basically everything on Earth. Extreme weather will start happening more often. Stronger hurricanes, heavier rainstorms, longer heat waves, bigger wildfires. The oceans will rise too, which can flood coastlines and put towns and cities at risk. Animals, plants, and entire ecosystems can get thrown out of balance, with some species struggling to survive and food chains breaking down. People all over the world will have to deal with crop failures, water shortages, and damaged homes or infrastructure. Let's get back to our zombie microbes. The thing is, the study only looked at them in one place in Alaska, but there's a massive amount of permafrost all over the world, in Alaska, Canada, Siberia, and many other places. And microbes in different regions might behave differently as things warm up. Scientists still have tons of work to do to figure out what's coming next. I bet you're questioning yourself. Could ancient viruses infect us? Well, most of the ancient microbes frozen in permafrost are totally harmless. They're like old bacteria that only care about messing with other tiny organisms in the dirt. But scientists worry that a few of these frozen germs might be the kind that can infect people, animals, or plants. And if that happened, our bodies probably wouldn't recognize them at all, because they've been frozen since mammoths existed. Basically, there's no immune system cheat codes for us. The risks of this happening grow for a number of reasons. For one thing, the Arctic is warming almost 4 times faster than the rest of the planet. Longer summers plus hotter temperatures mean more permafrost melting. So, more ancient stuff is waking up. Plus, people might start digging more around there. Companies will mine more, drill for oil, and ships can travel new routes. All this activity tears open ground that used to stay frozen solid. This increases the chance that someone or something comes across some ancient germ that just woke up. What would actually happen then? We might run into different zoonotic diseases, basically germs that jump from animals to humans. This already happened once. Thawed reindeer carcasses released anthrax, a rare and serious illness which then infected people and animals. Luckily, we do know how to treat anthrax. But what if something even older wakes up? Besides, our immune system might have zero defense. If a virus hasn't been around for tens of thousands of years, humans today would be like, what is that thing? No antibodies, no memories of it, nothing. But the scariest part is that we don't know what's hiding down there. Scientists think permafrost might be storing trillions of frozen microbes, many of which we've never seen before. Some might be boring, and some might be super dangerous. So what if one such virus finally thawed out? The world would be dealing with a disaster no one has ever seen before. This wouldn't look like a normal outbreak. It would feel more like something out of a horror movie. First, the virus would be totally new and our immune systems definitely wouldn't recognize it. That means the virus would spread crazy fast, jumping from person to person. No one would know what to expect. It could cause weird illnesses, sudden fevers, or even something way more dangerous. Stuff as scary as the diseases people faced in old times. Scientists digging in permafrost already look for traces of those ancient diseases, so it's not impossible. Once it escapes, the virus wouldn't stay local for long. With people traveling everywhere and companies rushing into the warming Arctic for mining and shipping, the infection could go from one small Arctic village to major cities all over the world within days. Hospitals would fill up instantly and doctors and nurses would run out of supplies. Businesses would shut down. Food supplies could crash if the virus hit farm animals or crops. Shipping and travel could freeze completely. Fear and panic would spread around the globe almost as fast as the virus itself. There'd be no vaccine and no cure, because no one has ever seen this virus before. Scientists would have to start from zero. In short, a zombie virus outbreak would be totally unpredictable, and the modern world is certainly not ready for it. Do you know how much gold has been mined by humans throughout history? About 216,000 tons, and 2/3 of this amount was mined after the 1950s. Different countries, different times, thousands of different people involved. But what if you found huge deposits of gold in one place? What if a giant gold ore deposit was discovered? No, not just giant, but supergiant. This is exactly what was found in China. A group of geologists discovered about 40 gold veins with about 330 tons of gold ore. But that's not all. 3D modeling has shown that even more gold lies underneath. At a depth of about 9,800 feet, there may be several hundred more tons. In short, there is a chance that they will discover deposits with about 1,100 tons of gold. Can you imagine how much that is? If not, that's about $83 billion. Wow! Experts say that this deposit contains approximately 4.9 ounces per ton of ore. It seems that this is negligible, but in fact, it's a high indicator in gold mining. Usually, 0.35 ounces per ton is awesome. If all calculations turn out to be correct, it will be the largest gold mine in the world, even bigger than the South Deep mine located in South Africa, with its 1,025 tons of gold. Everyone is worried. Everyone is happy. Gold, gold, gold on their minds. Everyone wants gold. Everyone buys gold. Gold is rising in price. Gold is more reliable than Bitcoin and cash. Gold is associated with wealth and luxury. Gold is always a valuable and profitable investment. But hold up. Why is it so? Why do people go crazy over some shiny metal? The fact is that gold has both practical and psychological value. For centuries, gold has represented power, prestige, and wealth in different cultures. It seems we're born in a genetic memory that gold is valuable. Think of how many problems gold has brought to literary heroes and how many gold-related adventures we've seen in movies. Gold makes people happy and greedy, cruel and intimidated. That's why so many people love it. Yes, it glitters, it's beautiful, but it's also practical. Gold doesn't rust, it doesn't corrode, it can be stored for a long time, and it doesn't deteriorate. It's literally a reliable investment. All other savings may lose value because of crises, but gold remains unchanged. The only problem, it can get stolen. In addition to jewelry making, gold is used in electronics, medicine, aerospace, and many other industries. Bitcoin has a value because of the public support of people around the world. Money has value thanks to the support of authorities. Gold has value on its own. It's tangible and visually appealing, and its worth is also supported by people's centuries-old belief in its enduring value. But never let gold cloud your mind. Many people lose their honor and even their minds over it. Avoid this trap. It's just a shiny piece of metal. There are other precious metals in the periodic table: palladium, silver, copper, platinum. Why is gold number 1? Cheaper metals such as copper, iron, lead, and aluminum corrode and rust. Aluminum is also not durable. Platinum and palladium are more expensive than gold, but they're too rare and difficult to mine. You won't make many coins out of them. Silver is softer than gold. It tarnishes, scratches, and deforms. And, well, to be honest, gold is more beautiful. But there is another reason why gold is so expensive. It's quite difficult to get. Gold mining is a very laborious and long process. In movies or documentaries, you might have seen people standing at the mouth of a river, collecting silt and clay, sifting it through gauze and small nets, and finding gold particles there. That's one of the methods for how gold is mined. You have to work hard to get just a few small pieces. How do they find gold? It used to be luck. Someone was walking along the shore and saw something glistening in the water. But today, gold detection methods are much more effective. Geologists know that gold is present in almost all rocks and soil, but its particles are so tiny that they're not visible. But when the concentration of gold is high and noticeable, work begins to extract it. Special geological teams are engaged in searching for these sites. When they discover gold, they drill wells, then take soil samples and decide if there's enough metal to carry out large-scale mining. Production depends on the deposit. If gold is in hard rock, miners drill holes, place dynamite, and detonate it. The explosion breaks the rock into pieces so they can extract the gold. But this is just the beginning of the work. After collecting large pieces of rock, workers take them to factories to extract valuable material. At the first stage, specialists break large pieces of rock into smaller ones. Using crushing machines, they grind the ore into tiny pieces, similar to gravel. This gravel then enters rotating drums filled with steel balls. The drums spin, and the balls grind the gravel into powder under pressure. This mass is then mixed with water and passes through special filters. After that, gold is extracted from the ore using chemical solvents and complex purification systems. It adheres to carbon, then is separated from it, followed by several additional processes, including electrolysis and further purification. At the end, the gold is melted and separated from impurities, then poured into ingots and sent to other plants for further processing. Yes, it's a difficult and time-consuming process, and quite a long one. And it's not always profitable. You can find a deposit of precious metal, but it will be too expensive to extract it, and the amount of gold there won't be enough to make the effort worthwhile. Only 10% of the world's gold deposits contain enough precious material to pay back for its extraction and processing. There are many areas filled with gold. Do you know how many of them are suitable for productive mining? Less than 0.1%. So this is probably another reason why gold is so valuable. But is there any other material that causes a lot of excitement? Oh yes, this material is called liquid gold. And this is helium. That's the gas used to inflate balloons. But this is not its main value. Helium is capable of reaching ultra-low temperatures, is superconducting, and is lightweight. Helium is used in medicine for diagnostics. For example, for magnetic resonance imaging. Helium cools nuclear reactors and maintains rocket fuel temperatures during launch. Divers breathe a mixture of helium and oxygen during deep dives to avoid diseases associated with pressure changes. Helium is crucial for the modern world. Another precious material is graphene. It's not just one of the most durable materials in the world, it's a highly conductive material. Heat and electricity pass through graphene easily, which makes it very promising for the development of what? Considering that graphene is also flexible, water-repellent, non-toxic, and has antibacterial properties, it's suitable for developing everything. Medical equipment, mechanical engineering, electronics, construction, logistics, energy conservation, space and underwater industries, and much more. Scientists believe that graphene has the potential to enable revolutionary new technologies that could change the lives of all people. Something similar happened with silicon, which is actively used to create semiconductors and rechargeable batteries. It's possible that without silicon, we wouldn't have smartphones, laptops, and other electronic devices. Graphene may also lead to a new technological leap. When the world switches to renewable sources of energy and uses electric transport, graphene can become technological gold. During tests, graphene batteries have shown that they charge more than 70 times faster than regular ones and last 3 times longer. At the same time, they're cheaper and environmentally friendly. Okay, that sounds cool, but where do we get this graphene? It's obtained from graphite, which lies in the bowels of the Earth. One of the largest graphite deposits is located in South Australia. 200 million tons of high-quality graphite. It sounds like it could be enough for the entire planet. Egypt has ruled as the owner of the world's oldest pyramid, until now. A newly discovered structure in Indonesia may predate Egypt by thousands of years. If this is true, it rewrites history. The world's first pyramid was born during the last ice age, and it's now located in the middle of the jungle. At first glance, Gunung Padang does not exactly scream pyramid. It looks more like a big mound with scattered stones tossed all over it. But recent excavations have revealed that far beneath the surface, there are stone structures buried in multiple layers, deeper and much older than anyone expected. We're talking possibly 27,000 years old. This is serious if we're talking about humankind's history. Today, the oldest known ancient society with this kind of building knowledge is probably 11,000 years old and used to occupy the region of modern-day Turkey. We've talked about Göbekli Tepe in some of our previous videos. Gunung Padang has got the scientific community divided and raising big, life-changing questions. You see, the site of Gunung Padang has long been considered sacred by the locals. Many even call it the Mountain of Enlightenment, and still use the site to perform mystical ceremonies. Westerners had no clue this place existed until the late 1800s. That's when a Dutch explorer heard whispers about a strange mountain and went to see it for himself. Just 4 hours south of Jakarta, he found something wild. Stacked terraces connected by rough stone steps, massive flat stones covering the ground, and towering pillars everywhere. To him, it looked like an ancient ceremonial site, maybe even a burial ground. For almost 100 years, mainstream archaeologists simply ignored Gunung Padang. The story resurfaced when a group of farmers brought attention back to the mountain in 1979. By the 80s, researchers finally started digging and found pottery fragments dating back to somewhere between 45 BCE to 22 CE. But here's where this story gets interesting. Some studies suggest the deepest layers of Gunung Padang are between 16 to 27,000 years old. That means this pyramid could have been built during the last ice age. And if that's true, it's older than Egypt's famous pyramids, the ones we thought were the world's first. This whole theory comes from geologist Danny Hillman. His team used ground-penetrating radar, core drilling, and carbon dating to study Gunung Padang, and what they found was pretty wild. According to Hillman, this place is like a giant ancient layer cake, built in stages over thousands of years. The youngest layer is around 3,000 to 4,000 years old. That's roughly the age of the pyramids in Egypt. When you dig a little deeper, you find Unit 2, which was built between 7,500 and 8,000 years ago. But here's where things get truly mind-blowing. Hillman claims the deepest layer, Unit 3, could be as old as 27,000 years old. His study suggests that Gunung Padang isn't just a hill. It's a stepped pyramid, complete with chambers and hollow spaces hidden underground. Although there's not much info about these chambers. The geologist does admit his theory sounds crazy, but he says it's all real and legitimate data. Hey, this is just one theory. Those who disagree with Hillman say Gunung Padang was not man-made. It was nature-made. Maybe not the upper parts, which Hillman calls Unit 1. The lowest units, which are the units that could change our collective history, are the problem. To understand what the fuss is about, we need to look at the soil. The area that Gunung Padang was built on is filled with volcanoes, which means it sits on top of volcanic soil. Hillman's team drilled into the mound and found something odd. Younger soil wedged between much older rock layers. To them, this was a clear sign that the stones were stacked, not naturally formed. After all, in nature, younger soil doesn't just sink beneath ancient rock. That would be like discovering fresh ink beneath the pages of an ancient manuscript. You know, something doesn't add up unless someone put it there on purpose. However, skeptics such as volcanologist Sunken Brauntal argue that Gunung Padang is not a human-made pyramid, but rather the remains of an ancient volcano. He believes the mixed layers of young soil and old rock are the result of natural erosion and geological processes, not human construction. Volcanic activity can create unusual formations over time, and without clear signs of tools, carvings, or human remains, many experts remain unconvinced. The mystery boils down to this paradox. Are we looking at the ruins of a lost civilization, or are we simply misinterpreting the work of nature? Most archaeologists say that to prove an ancient civilization existed, you first need signs of culture, art, tools, structures, something man-made. That's exactly why archaeologist Dibble, one of Hillman's biggest critics, isn't buying the pyramid theory. He argues that without solid proof of human activity, all we really know is that the soil in the mound is 27,000 years old, and that alone doesn't mean people were building pyramids back then. But here's the thing. The more we dig into ancient history, the more we find that our ancestors were capable of things we never imagined. The idea of advanced civilizations existing during the Ice Age seems far-fetched to many archaeologists. After all, who could have the technology and knowledge to build massive structures like pyramids in such a harsh environment? This is where some researchers, particularly Graham Hancock, come in. Hancock is known for his controversial theories that say that advanced civilizations may have existed during the Ice Age. The last Ice Age lasted from about 2.5 million years ago to roughly 11,700 years ago. During its peak, huge ice sheets covered large parts of North America, Europe, and Asia, making it a challenging time for human survival. Most archaeologists believe that humans during this period were mainly hunter-gatherers, moving from place to place in search of food and shelter. The idea that they had skills to build a massive pyramid-like structure is hard for many to accept. However, researchers like Graham Hancock argue that advanced Ice Age civilizations could have existed and been wiped out by cataclysmic events such as floods caused by melting glaciers. According to Hancock, these ancient cultures may have built monumental structures like pyramids. One of Hancock's most notable books, Fingerprints of the Gods, explores this theory in depth. He looks at evidence from ancient monuments, like Egypt's Great Pyramid of Giza and the megalithic structures in South America, and suggests that these could be the remnants of a forgotten civilization. Hancock's theories imply that knowledge and skills passed down from this ancient culture were eventually rediscovered and used by later civilizations, like the Egyptians and Mayans. If we apply this to Gunung Padang, the idea becomes even more fascinating. Could this ancient site in Indonesia be a remnant of a long-lost civilization that existed during the last Ice Age? We'll have to keep digging to figure this out. Either way, while scientists debate the origins of Gunung Padang, local myths offer a different explanation. One of the most famous local legends tells the story of King Siliwangi, a powerful ruler who wanted to build a grand palace in a single night. With supernatural strength, he began stacking enormous stones to create his masterpiece. But as the first light of dawn appeared, he realized he had failed to finish in time. Frustrated, he abandoned the project, leaving behind the massive rock formations that we see today. While this story isn't historical fact, it reflects how deeply Gunung Padang is embedded in the local culture. Even today, the site is considered a place of spiritual energy, attracting visitors who believe in its mystical power. Hindus from the island of Bali climb the mountain steps to conduct rituals related to the rising of the full moon. Followers of a variant of Indonesian martial art practice their discipline high on the mountain. As these sacred rituals continue, archaeology and geology keep trying to figure out if this really is the oldest man-made structure in the world.
A small team of Japanese scientists has just uncovered tons of new Nazca glyphs. In case you don't know, Nazca lines are massive geoglyphs of people, animals, and plants etched into the vast, arid plain in southern Peru. Most of them were created by the ancient Nazca civilization over 2,000 years ago. Originally, scientists found hundreds of different designs. They range from simple lines and geometric shapes, some of them being so straight they look like they were drawn with rulers, to large drawings of different creatures. The most famous designs are of a monkey, a spider, and a friendly-looking human figure known as the astronaut. Some drawings are as long as 600 feet. That's why they can only be fully appreciated from the sky, like murals on the ground. There's even a small airport near the town of Nazca that's mainly used to let the tourists fly over the glyphs to look at them fully. Unfortunately, you can't see them from a regular commercial flight. That's way too high. But this nearby airport offers smaller planes. It's wild how the ancient people managed to draw these glyphs so well in the first place. They didn't have drones or planes, not even some great tools. It was thousands of years ago. Well, they used very simple yet ingenious methods. First, they would remove the top layer of dark weathered rocks and expose the lighter dirt beneath. The light clay stands out against the darker ground. By clearing about 12 to 15 inches of stones, they could create clear, contrasting lines. The desert is very dry, and the clay has stuff in it that helps keep the lines from being blown away by winds or washed away with rains. That's why they've stayed there for thousands of years, even with the wind and weather. To make sure that the glyphs would be nice and precise, they probably used basic surveying tools, like ropes and wooden stakes, to help guide their designs. They would place the stakes in the ground to mark points along the lines, using ropes stretched between them to maintain straight lines or create perfect curves. This technique is similar to how modern architects might use grid systems, and it's kind of like what people did to create the famous extraterrestrial crop circles in the cornfields. So they likely first sketched smaller figures on the ground, and then used them as blueprints to scale up their drawings to the gigantic sizes we see today. And recently, 300 more of these mysterious glyphs were discovered in only 6 months. Normally, scientists had to sift through satellite images, walking or flying over vast stretches to study the glyphs. It was crazy hard, but now we have AI. The drones flew high over the desert, took lots of pictures from all angles, and fed them to the deep learning model. The AI system can scan tons of data in seconds, spotting the patterns that people can miss. And the symbols the AI uncovered are more special than what we knew before. These glyphs aren't huge. It's what they now call the relief-type glyphs. They're smaller and harder to spot, despite being literally in plain sight. Also, the large glyphs usually depict animals, but these relief-type ones mostly show humans and pets. For example, one of them is a 16-foot-long humanoid that clutches a club in its right hand. There was also a fish, mouth wide open as if gasping for air. This one stretches about 60 feet across the desert floor. And perhaps, most striking of all, a bird with 2 long dramatic legs, each leg extending 255 feet. The birds are very special because they've been misidentified for a long time. Now, scientists use the ornithological analysis to reclassify these creatures, and, as it turns out, the drawings depict birds from far-flung regions. There was this one glyph that looked like a simple hummingbird at first, but now, upon closer inspection, comparing beak shapes, wing patterns, and tails, it looks like this wasn't a typical hummingbird at all. It was a hermit, a subgroup of hummingbirds native to the forest regions far from the desert. They have long, slender beaks and distinct tail feathers. Another surprise was a drawing once labeled as literally just a bird. Now it turns out that it was a pelican, a coastal species commonly found along the shores of Peru, not in the desert. The pelican, with its wide wings and sharp beak, usually serves as a symbol of the sea and food. Perhaps this animal was sacred to the Nazca people. Now the question is, how did the Nazca people know these birds? What did a creature from the lush, humid jungles of northern Peru or from the shores do in the harsh desert sands of the south? And why did they decide to etch it in the ground? Looks like there's a much more complex story behind the Nazca lines as we thought before. One question boggled the minds of archaeologists for decades. What do these glyphs even mean? Well, the Japanese scientists have an idea. To read these symbols back in the day, you'd have to literally follow ancient trails, spotting some faded shapes underfoot. It's as if the Nazca people designed these glyphs to be discovered on foot, to be experienced as part of a journey. This, together with the fact that they can only be seen from the sky, hints that the Nazca lines might have been something like a sacred pilgrimage. Perhaps the idea was only deities above can see the full picture, while humans have to walk the path to understand the meaning. The lines are scattered across about 150 square miles of the Nazca Pampa, so there's a high chance that they were part of a spiritual journey to Cahuachi, a ceremonial center that still looms in the distance today. Cahuachi was super important to the ancient Nazca civilization, the heart of their society. It was most likely a religious and pilgrimage site during the first centuries of the Common Era, when the Nazca culture was at its peak. Other ancient cities were bustling hubs of daily life, but Cahuachi was unique. People didn't live there permanently. Instead, they traveled there from all other places for important events, seeking connection, understanding, and spirituality. Cahuachi consists of large adobe mounds and plazas. Locals gathered there for ritual and offerings. The largest building, the Great Temple, was an incredible stepped pyramid. It looked like this place was especially sacred to the Nazca people, since it was full of stuff like textiles, pottery, trophy heads, all the things that are often associated with rituals and sacrifices. Since Cahuachi isn't that far away from the Nazca lines, the two are most likely connected. They could be pilgrimage paths or ritualistic symbols, but there's still so much we don't know. Even if those are trails or symbols, what exact messages were the Nazca people trying to convey through them? These drawings could be telling amazing stories, marking some important locations, or even be a spiritual map to guide those who came after them. It's also possible that symbols' meaning depends upon their arrangement and patterns. Right now, over 700 glyphs have been revealed, but this is just the beginning. This just shows the potential of AI to revolutionize archaeology. For example, there's an entire ongoing competition called the Vesuvius Challenge. The idea is to help decipher ancient Roman scrolls from the city of Herculaneum. They were carbonized during the catastrophic eruption of Mount Vesuvius in 79 AD. These scrolls are too fragile to actually touch them. Because of that, they've been a challenge for centuries. But the novel AI approach uses virtual unwrapping. They scan the scroll's interior without damaging them and detect ink made from carbon that had long faded to the naked eye. There's already been some great progress. A 21-year-old student managed to reveal the first word from one of these scrolls, porphyris, meaning purple in ancient Greek. The competition has some great rewards, hundreds of thousands of dollars for future breakthroughs. All that is a handful of work for scientists, and they're determined to decipher it all. So, you've probably heard of the mythical city of Atlantis, but did you know there's a real Atlantis of the sands? In 1992, a group of amateur researchers and archaeologists got curious about a lost city called Ubar, supposedly hidden in the deserts of Oman. According to legends and ancient texts, Ubar vanished because a deity got angry with the city's ruler. For centuries, no one could find it, and it became more myth than reality. That is, until a likely duo, a lawyer and a filmmaker, teamed up with NASA. They used a special radar system that could see through the thick desert sands and discovered ancient trade routes, compacted by the movement of thousands of camels. Ooh, imagine how that smelled. Anyway, this led them to the remains of Ubar, a bustling center for trading frankincense 5,000 years ago, a substance once as valuable as gold. This information was all they needed to get boots on the ground and start exploring the area. A group of over 40 volunteers removed 200 tons of sand from the site, they found something big, but it really didn't look like a city. Most Arabs in the past didn't live in traditional dwellings. They tended to live in open-sided tents that allowed the cooling breezes to pass through. But at the center of the tent city, there was a fortress that was the king's home. The fortress they found was ringed by 8 walls, each about 2 feet thick, 10 to 12 feet high, and about 60 feet long. At each corner stood a tower roughly 10 feet in diameter and 30 feet tall, exactly as it was described in that ancient religious text. Now, what the king who built it didn't know is that he built his impenetrable fortress on top of a highly corrosive limestone cavern. With time, the layer of ground above the fortress gave way to a sinkhole, and the whole thing swallowed the fortress all the way. Sinkholes happen when underground water starts to erode the bedrock, making the soil very unstable and fragile. Having a city on top of that certainly doesn't help. The whole thing just went kaboom one fine day, and we only found out about it recently. Yow! Meanwhile, Santorini is known for its stunning views and romantic getaways. But it's also home to one of the most fascinating archaeological sites in the world, the ancient city of Akrotiri. Dating back over 6,000 or 7,000 years ago, Akrotiri was a Bronze Age hub. That is, until it was wiped out by a volcanic eruption. Everything changed for Akrotiri in the 16th century BCE, when a series of earthquakes hit the city. The city lay buried under volcanic ash, much like Pompeii. The exact date of the eruption is still debated, although there are some clues found in unusual tree ring patterns from years like 1597 and 1560 BCE. Now, it seems as though the residents of the city quickly packed up and left, and good thing they did, because what followed was one of the largest volcanic eruptions in the last 4,000 years. The ash was so thick that the city remained hidden for thousands of years. You see, the Akrotiri civilization was known for its monumental architecture and fantastic art, being sometimes called the first civilization in Europe. It flourished during the Bronze Age, and they grew so much because they were an important part of the copper trade. The civilization saw over 500 years of wealth and prosperity. They expanded so much, their cities had extensive drainage systems, and their people produced high-quality pottery, according to what researchers found in later excavations. Fast forward to 1867, when locals started stumbling upon ancient artifacts of this civilization in a quarry. These findings first caught the attention of a French geologist who did the first digs. But it wasn't until modern excavations that the true scale of the lost city was revealed. As archaeologists dug deeper, they discovered a sophisticated settlement. Akrotiri was a key trading hub between Crete and Cyprus, with evidence of copper, pottery, and paved streets. It was a bustling, organized city, until that devastating volcano wiped it off the map. What's left today are stunning remnants of their culture, like beautifully preserved frescoes. These paintings, created with mineral pigments, show scenes of daily life, flotilla of boats, blooming flowers, and birds in flight. Across the Atlantic, Peru is world-famous for the majestic ruins of Machu Picchu. But there's a lesser-known, heartbreaking chapter in its history, the tragic destruction of the city of Yungay. In 1970, a seemingly small shift in a tectonic plate triggered a massive 7.9 magnitude earthquake, causing devastation on a scale few could have imagined. It was a peaceful Sunday afternoon when the regions of Uncas and La Libertada were rocked by the quake. The epicenter was about 22 miles off the coast, where the Nazca Plate dives, or subducts, under the South American Plate. It affected an area of roughly 83,000 square kilometers, larger than Belgium and the Netherlands combined. The tremors were so powerful, they were even felt in central and western Brazil, which are not exactly close by, just to give you an idea. Although many towns were affected, Yungay was affected the most. The beautiful Mount Osakaram, towering over the city, turned evil when the earthquake triggered an enormous avalanche. A mass of glacial ice and rock, about 3,000 feet wide and a mile long, came barreling down the mountain at over 100 miles per hour. It roared down the slopes, gathering mud, rocks, and debris as it raced toward the city, obliterating everything in its path. In just minutes, the avalanche traveled over 8 miles and buried Yungay under tons of snow and mud. Over 25,000 people lost their lives in the disaster, leaving the city almost completely covered. Peruvian officials have since declared the place a national mourning area, forbidding any excavations out of respect for those who perished. What's even more astonishing is that a few people managed to find refuge in a nearby resting place on a small hill. Some say that the town's fate had been foretold years before by a priest who warned about living in the shadow of such an unstable mountain. There's no way to confirm this, but it remains a part of local legend. Now, as strange as it may sound, this American city is sitting at the bottom of the man-made Lake Shasta, and how it got there is what matters most here. Once, the city of Kennett in California had 40 saloons, dozens of stores, a hotel, hospital, a school, and an opera house. Today, it rests as deep as 400 feet below the water surface. In the beginning, the city of Kennett was a mining community. The town started to spark attention in 1852 when it was announced that gold was found in the area. Kennett was also very close to the Southern Pacific Railroad, so it was a hotspot for businessmen, railroad workers, and the thousands of mining men that worked in the surrounding mines. At its peak, Kennett boasted a population of 10,000 people. Apparently, the city grew too big, too fast, and its economy couldn't handle it. In 1923, Kennett's largest mine closed permanently, and that was just the excuse the officials needed. Authorities wanted to build a dam in the nearby region, so in 1935, they started working on the Shasta Dam. When Shasta Lake began filling up with water in 1940, the old town's hotel and saloon still existed and were left standing. Today, all of its remaining structure sits in the deepest part of Shasta Lake. Now, here's the craziest part. During a recent California drought, some parts of the town that were taken by the lake's water started to reveal itself. After almost a century underwater, old bridges, train trestles, tunnels, and the town's foundations started to pop out of the lake's muddy depths.
Nearly 140 years ago, some fishermen pulled pieces of a ship from Lake Michigan. But where was the rest of it? From that moment on, hunters spent years searching for the ghost ship. By the 1970s, the hunt reached a new level. One with a $1,000 reward offered to anyone who could find it. Still, nothing. It was as if the vessel had simply vanished into thin air. That is, until now. Researchers have finally found the shipwreck off the coast of Bailey's Harbor, Wisconsin. The ship called the F.J. King disappeared back in 1886. At that time, this 140-foot-long vessel had a very important job: transporting grain. Now you might think, grain? Really? That's it? Okay, sure, it's not like the ship was loaded with tons of gold or jewels. But we have to see the bigger picture. At that time, Wisconsin was known as America's breadbasket. The state produced huge amounts of food, especially wheat. In fact, about 1/6 of the nation's wheat was being harvested there. Farming was booming, and that of course meant big money. The F.J. King was part of that golden era.
For about 19 years, it successfully carried and traded grain and iron ore through the Welland Canal. That is, until September 15, 1886. That day, the crew were on their journey to carry iron ore from Michigan to Chicago. It was supposed to be just another routine trip, but they were caught in a powerful storm. The conditions were brutal, with waves nearly 10 feet high. The crew fought desperately to get the water out and keep the ship afloat, but the waves were too strong. They kept coming, one after another. The men worked hard until they couldn't go on anymore. The waves were splitting the ship's seams. At this point, a catastrophe was inevitable. So Captain William Griffin gave the order, "Abandon ship." They had no choice but to get out. The men grabbed their belongings as fast as they could and climbed into the ship's small yawl boat. It was 2 a.m. Everything around them was dark. As they tried to get closer to shore, the F.J. King went down, bow first. And then suddenly, boom! The crew watched in shock as the ship's stern deckhouse blew off, sending the captain's papers 50 feet into the air. They stayed in the small boat until they were picked up by a passing schooner called La Petite. The crew took them to Bailey's Harbor, and moments later, Captain Griffin filed a wreck report. That's when the real mystery began. In his report, the captain said the ship had gone down about 5 miles off the shore of Lake Michigan. But that was just what he thought. I mean, it wasn't based on any instruments, readings, or anything like that. It was just what he remembered from that night. A week later, though, a local lighthouse keeper spotted the masts of a schooner sticking out of the water, much closer to shore. He reported it to a nearby newspaper, and that's when people really started asking questions. Could that be the F.J. King? Even though they had a solid lead, it didn't take them anywhere. No one could find the boat. Days passed, then months, then years, until 2025. That's when an investigator named Brendan Baylod decided enough was enough. He gathered a team of about 20 scientists and historians to finally track down this historic shipwreck. They dug through hundreds of original documents about the ship and the day it went down, piecing together clues and narrowing down the area where it might be. Many experts were like, "Man, just let it go." And to be fair, they had every reason to feel discouraged. After all, that whole area had already been searched over and over. There was just no way the ship could still be out there. But Bayod didn't give up. Okay, truth is, he also thought it was a long shot. But working to find the ghost ship had other perks. His team wanted to get some hands-on experience with a brand new super advanced sonar. With that in mind, they set out on their mission, heading to Lake Michigan on June 28th. Okay, great. But where do you even start? First, Bayod had to clear something up. Back when the wreck happened, who was actually telling the truth about the ship's location? The captain or the lighthouse keeper? Getting that answer would point them in the right direction. Then, Bayod thought about something that might have already crossed your mind. How could the captain really know where they were? It was pitch black. He'd just been struggling to keep his ship afloat. He couldn't see much. He was exhausted and probably hungry. He definitely wasn't thinking straight. That's when the investigator realized the lighthouse keeper's directions were probably more accurate. Thankfully, he found the newspaper article from 1886. You know, the one I mentioned earlier, where the lighthouse keeper gave a more specific detail about where he'd last seen the ship's masts. What the investigator did next was draw a 2-square-mile grid around that location, and the team decided to map the lake bottom inside that grid using their fancy tech. So, there they were, aboard the Shoreline, a tour boat that usually carries sightseers along the peninsula. But that day, they didn't really expect to find anything. Their only goal that afternoon was to test their new side-scan sonar, one with much greater capability than the previous model the crew had been using. But then, after about 2 hours of searching, something strange happened. The sonar was sending out sound waves to map the dark floor of Lake Michigan when it started to act a little differently. And as the images began to stitch together, they revealed a shape that was impossible to mistake. A ship. Bingo. They'd found it. Turns out the wreck was less than half a mile from where the lighthouse keeper had said it would be. At this point, some of the crew had to pinch each other. They couldn't believe their eyes. They were shocked, not only because they'd found the ship so quickly, but also because of how well it was preserved. You see, the investigators were hopeful, but they also thought the ship would be shattered into pieces. After all, it had been carrying iron ore, and the weight of all that metal could have torn it apart even more. But no. To everyone's surprise, the hull was almost completely intact. Sure, the front right side was crushed, but the rest of it was pretty much there. The investigators even found the crew's belongings and kitchenware scattered across the lake bottom. Once they got over the shock, they called in archaeologists to examine the site and create a 3-dimensional model of the wreck. This is the 5th major shipwreck Bayod and his team have found in the last 3 years. But the truth is, this region is full of mysteries still waiting to be uncovered. The F.J. King is just one of around 6,000 ships that were damaged or destroyed in incidents across the Great Lakes during the 1800s. And it's estimated that hundreds of these wrecks still remain hidden at the bottom of Lake Superior, Michigan, Huron, Erie, and Ontario. Thankfully, discoveries like this one could become more and more common. In fact, more shipwrecks are being found today than at any other time in history. Advances in technology have made scanning the lake floor less expensive and more accessible, not just for professionals, but for amateurs too. And the profile of these modern-day shipwreck hunters has changed. Now, they're more often searching for wrecks for their historical value, not just to find treasure. Another project that could help uncover even more wrecks in the Great Lakes is called Lakebed 2030. It could change everything, as its goal is to map the entire lake floor. And right now, only about 15% has been explored. That means the Great Lakes might still be hiding their biggest secrets, and that, at the very least, is super exciting.
Scientists just uncovered what's basically Earth's own version of a dinosaur fossil hidden deep under the ocean near Easter Island. It's like finding a time capsule from 200 million years ago, revealing secrets of our planet's very ancient history. Earth's surface is made up of giant pieces, like puzzle pieces, called tectonic plates. These plates are slowly moving around all the time. Under these plates, there is a super hot layer called the mantle, and this layer is what helps the plates move. In September 2024, a team of geologists finally published the groundbreaking discovery that mentioned this ancient megastructure. This old piece of ocean floor might be connected to why the ocean floor is spreading apart faster in some places than in others. To figure this out, scientists use sound waves, known as sonars, to create a sort of map of what's happening deep underground. What they found was weird. There's a blob of stuff under the Nazca plate, a plate near South America, that's moving much slower than it should be. Now, normally, when plates move, some of the material sinks into the earth like a conveyor belt. But in this case, it's going slower than expected, like it's getting stuck on something. That something could be an ancient part of the ocean floor that got pushed down into the earth about 250 million years ago. This discovery is like finding a fossil deep inside the earth that shows us what things were like a really long time ago. When the ocean floor spreads apart, it's because two tectonic plates are moving away from each other. In the middle of the ocean, there's a long crack or ridge when this happens, kind of like a seam in the earth. As the plates pull apart, hot melted rock, called magma from deep inside the earth, bubbles up through this crack. When the magma hits the cold ocean water, it cools down and hardens, creating a new crust. This process keeps pushing the plates further apart. This process is also known as the Earth's mantle's recycling system. It's like the Earth keeps generating its own mantle constantly. On the surface, this process can cause earthquakes, underwater volcanic eruptions, and the formation of new land, sometimes even creating volcanic islands over millions of years. The cracks where this spreading happens are called ocean ridges, and one of the most famous ridges is the one we're talking about now, the East Pacific Rise. It's famous because it's spreading faster than most ones. This new discovery helps to explain why this may be so. You see, this huge megastructure sort of serves as a time capsule. Since the Earth's mantle is constantly changing and being created, finding a fossilized version of it is making scientists go bananas. It shows us what Earth looked like millions of years ago, back when the continents were in different places and our buddies dinosaurs roamed the planet. This ancient chunk of ocean floor also helps us understand how tectonic plates have moved through history. Although we usually hear and talk about Pangaea, the first supercontinent to exist on Earth was actually called Valbara. The shifting and moving of these tectonic plates are actually what gave rise to the continents we know and live in today. This huge fossil can also help to improve our knowledge of the so-called Earth's mantle's recycling system. By learning how this huge piece of crust got stuck and slowed down, scientists can better predict things like volcanic eruptions and earthquakes. Plus, it might even help us understand how other planets, like Mars or Venus, work beneath their surfaces. Well, I'd say science has a lot on its plate now. Pun intended. Other surreal stuff is constantly being found at the bottom of the oceans, seas, and lakes. Like this underwater Stonehenge. Scientists discovered a mysterious pile of cairns that stretched for miles under the shimmering waters of Lake Constance at the edge of Switzerland, Germany, and Austria. Archaeologists began to discover this back in 2015, and they haven't been able to understand what the site was actually used for. What they know until now is that there is a 12-mile line of 170 man-made stone cairns submerged under Lake Constance. Scientists say this was most likely the work of several villages, and that the cairn site was probably used for some collective purpose. The formations are huge, some of them are several dozen feet wide, and they can build up to 6 feet. The site probably dates back to 5,500 years ago. Now, it's no coincidence that scientists are calling this site the underwater Stonehenge, though. Both sites are believed to have been built around the same period of time. You see, Stonehenge dates back to around 3100 BCE. And also, both sites carry the distinct characteristics of stone monuments built in a circular format. Let's say they're like cousins. Meanwhile, in 2007, archaeologists found what looks like another mini version of Stonehenge underneath Lake Michigan. It's about 40 feet underwater, and this circle of stones is believed to have been created by indigenous people. They would have built it during the last ice age, when the lake wasn't even filled with water. The rocks are about 4 feet tall, and one of them might even have a carving of a mastodon, which was a huge elephant-like animal that lived more than 10,000 years ago before going extinct. If the carving is real, it could help scientists figure out just how old this site really is. What makes this even more mysterious is that nobody knows why the rocks were arranged in this way. But since a similar stone structure was found on Beaver Island nearby, experts think it's no accident. They were definitely placed there on purpose. The stones form 2 rings. The outer one is about 40 feet wide, and the inner one is about 20 feet wide. All the rocks are made from local granite, and they've been down there for around 9,000 years, which makes this one of the oldest structures in North America. To give you an idea of how ancient that is, these stones were set up long before the famous Stonehenge in England, which wouldn't be built for another 4,000 years. Now, all the way over in Japan, this mysterious structure was unearthed. At first, it looks like an underwater Machu Picchu. The site is filled with a huge pyramid-shaped structure, arches, staircases. It's something that could have easily been a palace or a castle. Behold, the Yonaguni Monument. It also goes by the name of Japan's Atlantis. The entire monument is about the size of 5 football fields and the height of a 5-story building. Its most surprising structure is its expansive terraces that host large crowd gatherings. Explorers and scientists believe that Yonaguni dates back to 10,000 years ago. But whether it is a human-made structure or a natural formation is still under debate. For Japan's top marine geologist, Yonaguni is the heritage of a lost civilization. This guy has dived into exploring the ruins over 100 times over the past 10 years. According to him, there are clear signs of human activity down there. The triangle pool, located on the monument's surface, is a triangle-shaped concave that is a historical symbol of water fountains in the region. There's also a giant turtle carved on the eastern side of the structure, which has an important cultural meaning. Several pieces of stone tools have been recovered from the site. Their estimated age dates back to 10,000 years ago. However, not all scientists are convinced of this explanation. For many, Yonaguni is the result of thousands of years of erosion. The fact that the monument is composed of one massive rock leads them to believe it is not human-made. The defined edges and flat surfaces resemble a natural formation occurrence in Northern Ireland known as Giant's Causeway, A series of interlocking basalt columns looked like the ruins of a palace, but they were the result of volcanic activity in the region.
If you think Neolithic people spent their days hunting and gathering, think again. These Spanish ancestors were out building impossible structures for their time, like the Manga Dolmen. This magnificent stone structure is located in Antequera, a city often called the heart of Andalusia in southern Spain. Andalusia is where Neolithic heritage meets with ancient Roman and Moorish roots, giving us a unique landscape and architecture. The Manga Dolmen is a 5,700-year-old monument, which means it was built when there was very little engineering technology available. It is one out of 3 megalithic structures located in Antequera. The other famous neighboring megalithic sites are the Dolmen del Romeral and the Dolmen de Vieira. But the Manga Dolmen is one of the most interesting ones since it was the first to be built, dating all the way back to approximately 3,800 BCE. Overall, it's 90 feet long, 20 feet wide, and 11 feet high. For years, researchers studied the building's structure, and this is what they found. Let's get one thing clear. Megaliths are structures made of large stones, and they're found all over the world. Most of them were built in late prehistoric Europe, and in this continent, there are over 35,000 megalithic structures. It derives from the ancient Greek words mega, which means great, and lithos, which means stone. The Manga Dolmen was only unearthed around the 1840s, but as soon as it was discovered, it was recognized as a masterpiece for its originality. Let's understand why. The fact that Manga has existed for nearly 6,000 years proves that its builders knew what they were doing. For starters, the mysterious builders of the Manga Dolmen transported its massive stones from the Cerro de la Cruz quarries about a half a mile away from where the dolmen stands. The thing is, the site has 32 absurdly massive stones. Its largest stone is nearly 5 times heavier than Stonehenge's largest stone. Together, they weigh about 1,140 tons, which is about the same as 2 jumbo transatlantic airplanes filled with luggage and passengers. The largest single stone in Manga, known as Capstone C5, weighs around 150 metric tons, which is about the same as a blue whale. Basically, these ancestral workers carried the largest stone ever moved as part of the megalithic phenomenon in Iberia, and the second largest one in France. In case you're wondering, the first place goes to a humongous monolith, weighing 330 tons. That was used to build the Great Broken Menhir in southern Brittany, France. How did they do it though? The first challenge was to carefully select the rocks that would be used to build the structure. According to experts, the builder chose calcarenites and calcarudites, which are considered soft or moderately soft rocks, probably because they would settle into each other more easily with time. Then they had to move these huge monsters. The most plausible guess is that they built a trackway to carry them, using scaffolds, ropes, and gravity itself. This way, they would minimize friction. To carry them downhill, the workers needed to have precise control of their acceleration and a precise notion of the balance point of each rock. Remember we said they used soft rocks, though. This meant they needed to be extremely careful when maneuvering them with ropes. Scientists' main guess is that they also had to build sledges on which to place the rocks. But moving the rocks wasn't their main accomplishment. You see, they designed a structure that would still be standing after centuries. And this is mainly due to the fact that Manga's builders used sophisticated techniques to protect the structure from erosion. In case you don't know, a dolmen is a type of single-chambered megalithic temple or final resting place. Most of them consist of 2 or more upright monoliths that support a large, flat, horizontal capstone or table. Most dolmens date from the late Neolithic period, and they can be found all over the world, in places such as Turkey, England, Indonesia, Spain, Brazil, and the list goes on. In the Manga Dolmen, researchers say they took extra care to waterproof the whole thing. The upright stones that make up the walls weren't placed straight up, but were actually tilted inward at around an 84 or 85 degree angle, making the whole chamber narrower at the top than the bottom, giving it a trapezoid shape. These stones also leaned sideways against each other, and this wasn't a random choice. The builders probably used some pretty advanced tools like levels and squares to make sure the angles were super precise. One researcher even said it was like building a giant Tetris puzzle where the builder had very little room to make mistakes, since the rocks were so absurdly heavy to move for adjustments. In order for the rocks to be tilted ever so slightly, the builder had to design deep foundation sockets on which to place the rocks. These sockets allowed them to have control of the millimetric positioning of the rocks, so that they would really interlock with one another. The cherry on top was literally the capstones. Once the massive capstones were added on top, the whole thing became a solid box. They carved out the inside from the bedrock beneath it, leaving the walls and roof intact. To protect the chamber, they piled a huge mound of soil over the top, kind of like wrapping the structure in a blanket. This kept the chamber warm and dry, and also added extra stability, almost like a natural straitjacket to hold everything together. Oh, and there's another very important detail. The builders aligned the dolmen with the nearby mountains, not only for practical reasons, but also to create intriguing light patterns within the chamber. This alignment proves how much planning went into the construction of the megalith, pointing to the builders' deep connection with astronomy as well. An avid researcher of the site said it's not exactly clear the reason why dolmens were built. Not many relics have been found on site, but many agree that it was probably used as a temple and resting places for important people. That's why they were built to last eternally. The Manga Dolmen specifically was built in a seismically active region, so that was another reason for the sturdy structure. It seems that the builders were also thinking of other details as well. From the entrance of the dolmen, one looks directly to the so-called Lover's Rock and the sunrise both at the same time. The Lover's Rock is an important part of local folklore and is a part of the circuit of dolmens from Antikythera, even though it's not a megalithic structure. The Lover's Rock supposedly got that name after an enamored couple threw themselves from the top of the mountain, since they were forbidden to be together in this lifetime. A classic Romeo and Juliet true life story, if you will. The Manga Dolmen is also astronomically aligned, like most dolmens around the world are. During the summer solstice, there is a specific part of the day when the sun enters the dome, illuminates the right side, and leaves the left side completely in the shadows. They had to think of the dolmen's exact precision so that would happen, you know? And speaking of folklore, while some cultures say that these impressive dolmens were built by a little gray people from other planets, Iberian culture has another guess. In local legends, some speak of the so-called enchanted muras, which were fairy-like creatures. These beings were known to be earth elementals, extremely beautiful, seductive, and powerful in their own rights. One of their main gists was building dolmens, where they would hide and practice their own ceremonies. There is a lot of reference to these beings in local lore, so hey, it's worth a mention. Either way, it's no wonder UNESCO decided to name it one of its National Heritage Sites. It's a true ancient masterpiece. They finally did it. After 300 years of searching, archaeologists pinned down the location of the lost land of the White Jaguar, the city of Maya hidden in the wild jungles of Mexico. It all kicked off back in the 1500s with the Lacandon Maya. These guys were some super tough survivors who just didn't quit. When their main capital, Lacamtun, fell to the Spanish in 1586, most people would have called it game over, but not the Lacandon. Nope, they packed up, headed deeper into the rainforest, and built their last stronghold, Sak Balon. It was a hidden fortress of stone temples, twisty jungle trails, and howler monkeys acting like noisy little guards. For over 100 years, the Lacandon managed to keep their traditions alive there, far from European control. Then, in 1695, history came crashing in. A Spanish friar named Diego de Ribas stumbled into Sak Balon. And yeah, that was basically the beginning of the end. Soon after, the Spanish took over. By 1721, the Maya had abandoned Sak Balon. The jungle didn't waste time. It swallowed the place whole, with roots tearing into walls and vines smothering plazas. The city didn't just disappear, it got eaten alive. For the next 300 years, Sak Balon turned into more of a myth than a memory. A name archaeologists and explorers would whisper, secretly hoping to find it one day. Plenty of expeditions tried to track it down, but the rainforest is sneaky. Every path looks identical, maps fall apart in the humidity, and even GPS can't cut through the thick green ceiling. It was like looking for a needle in a haystack, except the haystack was alive, covered in thorns, and yeah, crawling with jaguars that would happily make you lunch. So how did the scientists crack the mystery? One word: a letter from the 17th century. The letter by Diego de Ribas described all the routes, rivers, and trails leading to Sak Balon. It showed in every detail the journey of the soldiers who walked 4 days to the Lakuntun River after leaving Sak Balon. Then they sailed for 2 days and arrived at the church El Encuentro de Cristo, left their canoes, and continued on foot to Lake Petén Itzá in Guatemala. This was already detailed enough, but the scientists needed to pinpoint the exact location with geographic information systems. They took into account vegetation layers and how much each person was carrying to map an approximate range where Sak Balon should be. They fed this information to GIS and calculated where the city should be. And bingo, it worked. Archaeologists traveled through the jungle and found stone temples rising like broken teeth from the earth. There were also some tools and ceramics, and a Spanish church right in the middle of the ruins. The discovery isn't just about cool ruins, it rewrites history. For decades, people assumed the Lacandon simply scattered after Lakumtun fell, but Sak Balon proves they regrouped, fought, and preserved their culture for over a century more. It's like discovering the final chapter of a book we thought ended too soon. There's also irony here. The Spanish friar who revealed Sak Balon helped doom it. Yet his letter, centuries later, also helped save its memory. Today, the ruins sit inside a biosphere reserve, protected by the same jungle that once hid them. Tourists can't just waltz in. It's raw, tangled, alive. The city breathes again, but on its own terms. Scientists just uncovered another lost city, buried under the thick jungles of Mexico. It had been hiding there for 600 years. The place is called Genola, and it's massive, about 360 hectares with more than 1,100 buildings, 2.5 miles of defensive walls, its own network of roads, and a super organized city plan. Because it was so deep in the jungle, you'd never realize how huge it really was unless you spent years hiking through it. But modern tech swooped in to save the day, using Lidar, a kind of laser scanning tool. Researchers flew over the site, and in just 2 hours, they had a full 3D map of the entire city. Genola was built sometime between 1350 and 1521, back in pre-Columbian times, and it used to be buzzing with life. It was a major hub for the Zapotech people, who had been around in the region since about 600 BCE. Families there lived in homes with big central patios surrounded by rooms, and as they got new members, they just add more rooms and stretch their houses out. They even used the mountains around them as natural walls and channeled mountain water for drainage. A lot of their buildings are still standing, which is wild considering how much time has passed. By the late 1400s, the Zapotech were real powerhouses along the Pacific coast. They even fought off the Aztecs, who were constantly trying to expand. At Genola, they survived a brutal 7-month siege. But even though hiding in the mountains kept them safe, it wasn't perfect. They didn't have enough fresh water or farmland to feed everyone. Just 12 miles away, the smaller city of Tehuantepec had what they needed. So the Zapotech moved there right before the Spanish arrived in 1521. What the scientists have seen so far is just scratching the surface. That Lidar scan revealed more than 1,000 buildings, and archaeologists are planning years of research to figure it all out. Instead of digging everything up and risking damage, they'll use advanced scanning tech to keep studying the city safely. Alright, now let's hop across the world to Egypt, where archaeologists stumbled on a whole lost city called Imit, tucked away in the eastern Nile Delta. The place was buried under layers of mud, water, and time, hiding in a swamp that's been shifting and changing for thousands of years. Scientists first noticed it from way up high in faint little clusters of mud brick foundations in satellite images. The shapes looked shaky and ghost-like, but too neat to be natural. So they followed the patterns down on the ground, started digging, and the city started coming back to life. They found multi-story tower houses, basically mini skyscrapers of the ancient world. They had multiple floors, thick foundations, and could handle some serious weight. That kind of vertical living is super rare in Egypt, especially outside the Nile Delta. It showed that people in Imit weren't just spreading across the land, but stacking upward, which means the city was packed, carefully planned, and way more urban than anyone thought for that time. And it wasn't just fancy housing either. Archaeologists also uncovered a grain processing center with paved work areas, animal pens, and organized spaces for food production. Clearly, this was a city with a real economy running behind it. Not far from there, they spotted a ceremonial road that once led to a temple for Wadjet, Imit's patron deity. But later on, other buildings got plunked down over the road, which shows that Wadjet's worship faded over time. Still, the ruins coughed up some amazing relics, a green faience little funerary figurine, and a stela showing Harpocrates perched on crocodiles and gripping snakes. He was the Greek spin on Horus, deity of silence, secrets, and the newborn sun. And there was even a bronze sistrum, an ancient Egyptian musical instrument decorated with twin heads of Hathor. Turns out, Imit was active from around the 4th century BCE onward, stretching from Egypt's late period into the Roman era. Its location along trade routes made it a magnet for merchants and pilgrims visiting Wadjet's temple. So it wasn't just hanging on, it was thriving, connecting, trading, and adapting with the times. And this isn't just another dusty ruin. Imit is giving us a window into everyday life, religion, and urban planning in the Delta, which we've always known way less about compared to the big pyramids and tombs.
Okay, are you ready for an epic fight between two prehistoric predators? Well, hang on. Look at this creature. You know it. An ancient shark about 65 feet long that used to swim through the dark waters of the world's oceans and was so terrifying it had no enemies. Well, almost. Scientists have recently discovered the remains of another ancient predatory fish off the coast of Australia, a fish that lived around the same time as Megalodon. It was small, about the size of a dolphin, but it could pose a danger to the infamous shark. How is it possible if this creature was many times smaller? Well, let's take a look. This monster is called Janjucetus, and technically it wasn't exactly a fish. It was a distant relative of the modern baleen whale. Outwardly, it may seem quite cute, similar to that baleen whale I mentioned, but you wouldn't want to meet it in the ocean. It had the massive skull of a whale, large eyes the size of tennis balls, and a short snout with an immensely powerful jaw filled with razor-sharp teeth. In other words, it was like a shark version of the baleen whale. Janjucetus lived during an ancient period called the Oligocene, which was about 33 to 23 million years ago. At that time, there was an incredible abundance of life in the world's waters. Giant penguins, small whales, sharks 2 to 3 times larger than modern ones, primitive dolphin species, and many other unusual creatures. Now imagine that in this ancient and terrifying neighborhood, a giant megalodon met a Janjucetus. At first sight, it's not love. The megalodon's victory is obvious, but don't rush to write the Janjucetus off. It's agile and fast. It's quite possible that it was more mobile than Megalodon, and during the fight, it would have avoided a direct attack. The Megalodon would have lost sight of such a small opponent, while the Janjucetus would have swum up to the shark's belly and opened its jaws. They're small, but there are a lot of sharp teeth. Now, these teeth were designed to rip and cut. The Janjucetus would attack the Megalodon with a small but very unpleasant bite, and the shark would have swum away after such a punch. But who knows? Maybe Megalodon would have immediately eaten Janjucetus in the first seconds of the fight. Megalodon could have won, but in terms of speed and mobility, it would have lost. So let's look at something bigger, something that could actually have competed with Megalodon. It doesn't have to be a monster living at the same time as the ancient shark. We can make our own rules. Imagine that all ancient marine creatures ended up in the same pool with Megalodon. So its next opponent is the Liopleurodon. Now initially scientists thought that this monster could grow to be 82 feet long, which is even larger than Megalodon. But more accurate studies have shown that it only reached 32 feet, which is about the size of a modern orca. The Liopleurodon lived in the waters of Western Europe around 160 to 155 million years ago and shared territory with other dangerous reptiles such as ichthyosaurs and plesiosaurs. Yes, it was smaller than them, but it had one big advantage. The Liopleurodon possessed one of the largest jaws in the animal kingdom, which accounted for about 20% of the total length of its entire body. That's a mouth. Its jaws were about 6.5 feet long. A huge, toothy mouth the size of an adult basketball player filled with smooth and dagger-sharp teeth, ideal for cutting steaks and peeling ammonite shells. And by the way, scientists suspect that ammonites and squid were the creature's main diet. This super predator was also a very fast and agile creature that ambushed and attacked its prey from below. Megalodon would have been in big trouble. The grip strength of a Liopleurodon would surely be more powerful than that of Megalodon. Besides, the Liopleurodon's size and mobility would allow it to attack the enemy from different sides. It's probably why Megalodon would have lost in that fight. The next opponent for our Megalodon is the Dunkleosteus, and to be honest, this guy has almost no chance of defeating the large ancient shark. But the Megalodon probably wouldn't have beaten it either. The Dunkleosteus was one of the earliest predators of the ocean. It lived in the late Devonian, about 382 to 358 million years ago. Its size was about 13 to 32 feet or even less, and it also had no teeth. What? A predator without teeth? How did it survive in a dangerous prehistoric world? Well, it grabbed and chewed food with the help of special jaw growths. Those growths were so powerful that they could pierce steel, if there was any around. In a sense, these were not teeth, but bones. Okay, let's say the Megalodon grabbed this predator by the belly and it couldn't do anything with its growths. But the problem is that the Megalodon would have hardly done anything either, because the Dunkleosteus was a heavily armored fish. Just look at this shell. It probably limited its mobility, but it provided incredible protection. This monster felt like a big stone in the teeth of the Megalodon. It's unlikely that the Megalodon would have wanted to chew this stone. It would have spit it out, and both predators would have gone about their business. We've got a draw here. And now, the final match. Here's the next opponent. You see anything? Is this enemy invisible? What's happening? Ah, there it is. Meet the Telemonstrum. It's a tiny ancient monster, just 11 inches long. Huh? What can it do to a giant shark? Next to the Megalodon, the Telemonstrum is like a box of matches compared to a human. But if the megalodon had had a developed brain, like people do, it would have been very scared of this creature and would have immediately swum away. Many people scream and run away in fear when they see a creepy insect crawling or flying, or when a mouse runs across the floor. Some of us jump on the couch in horror. Not all of us, but some. The megalodon would have jumped out of the water like a dolphin if the telemonstrum had charged at it. Just check it out. It looks like an underwater bike with a long trunk with a jaw at the end. And these handlebars, where you would put your hands to control your bike, are the eyes. It's like the eyes of a hammerhead fish, only thinner and longer. The body of a squid, cuttlefish fins, snail eyes, and a toothed proboscis. This is a horror movie character. Scientists say it probably hunted jellyfish, small fish, and shrimp. And it didn't chew the food, it licked it like ice cream. Obviously, it's not an opponent for the megalodon, but it's still a creepy monster. Well, what would have happened had it really started a fight with the megalodon? It would have been difficult for the ancient shark to find it. It would have been unlikely to catch this tiny monster in the mouth, and the telemonstrum wouldn't have been able to do anything to the megalodon either. However, I can think of one strategy. The creepy creature had a long trunk. What if it had just swum under the megalodon's fin and started licking it? If the shark had felt the tickles, then it would probably have worked. But most likely, they wouldn't have fought each other. It seems like they would have made perfect friends. The telemonstrum lived about 300 million years ago in shallow seas and estuaries that covered the territory of the U.S. When scientists discovered this creature in 1955, they were shocked because no one had any idea what it was. Experts compared it to worms, tunicates, conodonts, mollusks, and vertebrates. And do you know who it really was? Well, scientists still have no idea. They can't determine its place on the tree of evolution. Perhaps this is some new branch, and its descendants simply haven't survived to this day. The megalodon was one of the most dangerous predators on Earth. But now we know that other equally scary monsters lived in the oceans. But what if the megalodon lived today? Who could have defeated him? A blue whale who would be even bigger than this ancient shark. But the blue whale seems to be a kind animal. It wouldn't fight. How about the kraken? The kraken versus the megalodon? Well, let's save this fight for another video.